Welcome to Kickin' with the Rickens, redefining retirement. Gerry Ricken and Heidi Ricken Provost want to help you retire with purpose and live with joy. Find more information, including how to reach the team, in today's show notes. Now, Kickin' with the Rickens, powered by Ricken Financial.
Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for downloading. Thanks for listening to Kickin' with the Rickens podcast. We are here with retirement planner Heidi Ricken Provost and licensed insurance professional Gerry Ricken. My name is Mark Owens. We invite you to get more at rickenfinancial.com. You can get all the information here in the show notes. Thanks again for subscribing. Now, let's get to the show. First and foremost, welcome home. We're going to talk about the power of pivoting. You went from an incredible destination trip, great experiences, and then you got to spend a little extra time in the airports across America. How y'all doing this weekend?
Doing great, Mark. How you doing, buddy?
Life is good. I'm home.
Now that
Life
you're
is
home,
good.
that you're finally
She's
home.
finally home.
Oh, yeah.
So you had the opportunity to spend some time in the Bahamas. Great trip with some folks in the industry. Got some sun, had some cocktails, some time in the pool, and then it was time to head home. Well, traveling is no longer easy. Traveling is now a chore. And Heidi, you learned about the power of pivoting. What happened to you?
Well, my one day of travel turned into 26 hours of travel, thanks to the weather in St. Louis, Missouri. So I was just supposed to fly through Philly and then get home late Sunday night. And our flight to St. Louis was canceled, and everything else that could get us home had already pushed back. And we got to spend the night in Philly and fly through Charlotte to get home the next day, then sit on the tarmac over an hour after we landed because of weather. So, hey, got home safe and sound, but a 26-hour excursion is not fun.
You know, it just goes to show that we're not in charge of our own lives.
Oh, yeah.
So Mother Nature's
But
in
for
charge
what
of
we
some
are
things.
in charge of, maybe we need to plan a little bit better, because I spend every day planning for others.
Yeah.
And here I was stuck in Philly without any of my toiletries, and I didn't even have a clean pair of underwear with me.
Oh, good Lord.
No, that's
You
too much
know,
information.
because all of that was in my checked bag. Our carry-on, we had two carry-ons. One had our dirty laundry in it, and the other had all of our tchotchkes that we got. And now I'm like, okay, now I understand. By the way, my husband's toiletry bag, all he had in that was deodorant and a toothbrush.
So you smelled like Right Guard traveling through the Philly airport.
Actually, I did. I was like, I get to wear your deodorant and smell like you today. So,
That's love.
you know?
That
Worst
is
things
love.
could happen.
The story just gradually, you're like, all of my luggage is already shipped home. It's on a whole nother airplane. I've got my carry-on, but it's got dirty laundry in there. So it's not like I can go digging through my carry-on, you know, and then I'm wearing my bathing suit as my underwear for 15
I know,
hours.
right?
Give me the time frame real quick. So what time did you leave the hotel on Sunday, headed home?
I left the hotel Sunday to head home at 1 p.m. and I got home at 3 p.m. the next day.
This wasn't like a destination trip, you know, to Ireland or to Scotland or to
Oh,
Europe.
no, this was just
the
a hop,
Bahamas.
skip, and a jump away in the Bahamas.
Down the East Coast. But the best part is you made it home. And I love that
yeah.
you're home safely. But we've learned a lesson about sometimes in life, Heidi, you just have to pivot. And this is something that you do every day at Ricken Financial with the families you serve.
Of course, because you might have the best retirement plan in the absolute world, but things can happen that make you pivot from that original plan. One thing I've learned from this experience, step one, I need to have a better travel plan when I'm traveling. I need to ensure no matter what happens, whatever I have in my carry-on can get me through the night. You know, That's step one. And I liken that to the people we work with. If you have worked with some advisor who's put everything together for you to accumulate funds for the future, and you don't really have a full service financial plan in retirement that's going to handle your income, your investment risk, your health insurance, and your long-term care plans, your life insurance, your legacy and estate planning, and your taxation, then you don't have a good basis for retirement. You don't have a good retirement plan. So that's the first step. You need to make sure you have a good retirement plan. But then what if something happens that makes you pivot from that? Yeah. And in retirement, what that can look like for you is a health crisis. We have a client who we love dearly. He's also a part of our family, and he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at a very young age. That was not a part of our plan. we had long-term care planned for the long term, for the future. And at a very young age, being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, that's going to cause the plan to pivot.
Yeah.
You know, these two had planned for extra vacations and to see the grandkids that were out of town more often and to play tennis and go out to eat and all these things. And that has to pivot. You know, they're not going to have the wealth of time anymore. But we also had to pivot the structure of income so that we can now cover the cost of care. So something catastrophic like that can happen. And you, unfortunately, as human beings, fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way we look at it, as human beings, we're creatures of habit and we like our routine and we're uncomfortable with change. So if you had this big life-changing moment of retirement that you'd planned for anyway, and now you have to pivot from that change to a new change, it can be really uncomfortable and really hard to do without, you know, professional advice and someone that you can rely on and trust to help you through it. But there are a lot of pivots we're going to have to make throughout retirement.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there are, and the earlier you actually plan for those, the better off you're going to be. A lot of people say, well, you know what, I'm really not ready to retire, so I'm not going to come in and see you, Heidi and Gerry. Well, we believe you should come in and see us before you retire, because what happens, you know, you're in your early 60s and all of a sudden your corporation goes through a downsizing.
Yeah.
And you get an early retirement package thrown in front of you. And they say, it's been nice for you to be here for years, but now here's your severance package and you're out the door. Well, you certainly need to pivot then. You should have a plan in place before that even happens. But when that does happen, you need to pivot in life. Things are out of your control. And when things are out of your control, you need to be able to react to those appropriately and without emotion. Because a lot of people are very emotional in these situations, but you need to really have, you know, look at someone who can take the emotion out of the equation and just look at it from a very mathematical solution and say, here's what we can do now. And here are the opportunities that we have to really change the plan and put things in motion that will be what's in your best interest, not from an emotional perspective.
We were talking about this earlier, too. One of the most emotional pivots that might occur during your retirement years is the loss of your spouse. Mm-hmm. And whether it's sudden and unexpected, or I'm sorry, even if we know someone is sick and they're not going to be with us forever, that still feels sudden the moment it happens. Yes. But, you know, even when we can quote unquote plan for it, when you lose a spouse, everything's going to change. Mm-hmm. And it is going to cause an emotional reaction to a lot of things. And that's why you need a financial plan that's not going to be driven by emotion, because a lot of times we make the financial decisions with our emotions and not with logic and math. We make the wrong financial choices. But it can be really scary to think, what if I have to do this alone without my spouse one day? Or we had all these plans to travel the world, to do these things together, and now I don't have a person to do it with. Mm-hmm. That's going to change every facet of your plan. And that's when we can be here to step in and assist and guide, because, you know, at that point in time, we want you to be able to sit back and grieve and not have to worry about what's going to be the ramifications to your financial plan when you no longer have that spouse in your picture.
Gerry, I was telling Heidi before we got started, as we're talking about the power of pivoting here this weekend on Kickin' with the Rickens, that this exact situation happened to my stepmom and my dad. They had a plan. She retired. Dad was semi-retired. They moved to the beach. This was the beach house for the kids, for the grandkids. This is where they were going to grow old. This is where the grandkids were going to come see Pops and Granny Kathy. Dad got sick. 3 months later, he was gone. But Kathy said, I'm going to stick to the plan. This was our plan. I'm going to stick to it. But Gerry, after about 3 years, she said, I can't do this anymore. This was me and your father's plan. This isn't my plan. And she moved back home. And I think, Gerry, that's why it's so important to have people like you in our lives to help us out when these situations happen. Tell us how we can reach out to you and the team at Ricken Financial and begin these conversations.
You know, just call us at 314-207-6211, and we'll just sit down and have that conversation, because a plan starts with a conversation, and it's a very comfortable conversation to have. We just sit down, understand your wants, desires, needs, what your purpose is going to be in retirement, and we will build a plan around that. And we will, every time things change, people come in and see us. We say, we want to see you periodically, and we force people to come in once a year. We like to see our clients a lot more frequently than once a year, or as your life changes, your plan needs to change. So we always want to have our finger on the pulse of what's happening in your lives.
Yeah. So to get started with your own personalized, holistic retirement plan, we call it the Purpose Approach here. Just give us a buzz at 314-207-6211. We'll meet and we'll get this started on a complimentary basis. Again, that's 314-207-6211, or head over to rickenfinancial.com, RICKEN financial.com.
Talking about the power of pivoting this weekend. And it's not all bad, Heidi. Sometimes you pivot for the best reasons possible.
I have to tell you, last week when we were in the Bahamas, the resort we were at had a water park. And sometimes I forget the hard work I've done on my health, because I went with a group of adult children, I will call us, and they wanted to go down every single water slide. And as we got there, in the back of my head, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to walk over all the way there with them, and then I'll cheer them on as they do this, because I kept thinking there's no way like this body can qualify to get on all these slides.
Right.
There's always a weight limit. And fast forward to being there, I then had to pivot and be like, I don't want to go on this 5-person slide that they're trying to hit the top of the tunnel in, but I don't have an out for my weight anymore. So we're going to do it. And you know what? I had a blast.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's not always like a bad thing that happens, but
that's a celebratory pivot right there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What if in retirement, something happens that you get to pivot for a positive reason?
Mm-hmm.
What if all of a sudden you have grandchildren that you never thought you would have, and you're going to pivot your income plan because you want to spoil them now, or you want to go travel out of town to spend time with them? That could be a beautiful pivot that we have in retirement. What if there's a pension buyout and all of a sudden you have a windfall of cash coming into you? Well, you're probably going to have to pivot your tax plan, especially that way.
Well, you certainly will. And because, after all, taxes are going to be our most expensive thing in our lifetime. So why not design your lifestyle so that you pay less in tax? And if you wanted to learn more about what that sentence really means, call 314-207-6211. And part of our overall planning is always focused on taxation.
Which leads into this, a lot of times the positive pivot, I would say, that we see in people's retirement plans is an unexpected sale. So whether you have ownership of a business or stock or a property and it's going to sell now, how do we handle that one? How do we pivot for that sell? And that has this snowball ripple effect on your retirement plan, because first thing that's going to happen is, okay, if you have cash coming in, do you get to decide if this is a one-time transaction, or if we could do this in an installment sale so you can push the income off for a couple of years and maybe do some effective tax planning that way. But, if it's not something that you can control the terms and agreements of, and it's just all of a sudden a windfall of cash, how do we handle the taxes is the first question, because your tax plan is going to have to pivot for that when you have an influx of cash here. And then how do you effectively pivot the income and expense plan? Because if you were not expecting an influx of cash, we are human beings. And when human beings receive cash, we like to spend it. So sometimes we see, if this occurs, that maybe one or both spouses in a family, or if you're a single person, they might want to spend a little bit more than they should be spending. So how do you effectively ensure that the rest of your retirement is not going to be broken because of a positive influx like this? Well, you got to update your retirement plan with the ins and the outs. Because if you are only seeing the dollar sign of what's coming in, you might not realize the ripple effect of spending that if we're not planning for the taxation, if we're not ensuring that your money's still going to stand the test of time on healthcare. There are so many things that can affect you. You just need to effectively plan for it and update your retirement plan, because Your retirement plan should be living and breathing and updated continuously. But something like this is going to cause a huge pivot when all of a sudden you have a lot of cash you didn't expect to be having at that point in time.
Especially when you're selling a business, if you get the money in and you don't understand the tax consequences of that sale, you may be overspending, and where you maybe have to save a portion of that back for taxes. And it all really, you can be very creative when you're selling your business, and that is, selling stock versus selling your assets. If you're selling your assets, how do you allocate your assets between goodwill and, physical assets? There's a methodology there that needs to be implemented each and every time when you analyze a sale to make sure that you are paying what you need to be paying in taxes, but no more than that.
If you don't work with the right professional and you don't know how much the tax ramification is actually going to be, and you see these dollar signs and you start spending, the worst case scenario is you have an issue with the IRS in retirement. And we never want you to have an issue with the IRS, no matter what stage of life you're in. But we especially don't want you to have an issue with the IRS if you're on a fixed income. So this is something that's really positive and wonderful. It just needs to be planned for accordingly so that, you take care of the tax piece of it, and then you get to expand your purpose approach in retirement, and you get to take more vacations or right size to the correct home that you're looking for or something like that. It actually takes some planning, whether it's a negative or a positive, that helps us pivot. It's going to take some planning to ensure that you're always matching your needs in retirement. And that's why you need to be working with an effective planner and not just a money manager or an advisor who's going to give you investment advice, but someone who's looking at a plan overall. If you want to get started on the purpose approach with us and look through the facets of your retirement plan so you can effectively put something together, give us a buzz at 314-207-6211, and we'll start the purpose approach with you.
A lot of people, when they sell a piece of property, we mentioned selling a piece of property, they forget that they put a lot of money into this property over the years. And you haven't had the opportunity to write that off or expense that from a tax perspective. But people just forget, oh my gosh, I put this addition on, and they don't add that to their taxable basis, the cost of the home. So when they go to sell it, they're actually paying more in tax because they didn't keep good records, or they just forgot, or they weren't working with the right person on how to really plan for that sale. And planning for that sale means I bought a home for $150,000, but I may have put in $40,000, $50,000 in it before I sold it. And, that's just an example. Maybe you bought something for $500 and you put a $250,000 addition on it. Well, and you're selling that for $800. Your gain is a lot different if you add what you put in on it. And we just want to make sure that you're thinking about how taxes affect you in your property sale, because we want the most out of your retirement. So why not pay the least amount of taxes when you're able to?
And here's the thing. We all think we're an expert in every facet of our lives, thanks to the creation of this lovely thing called the internet.
Right.
It used to just be Ask Jeeves, and now it's Google, and now we have all this AI or whatever. And we think we can DIY anything because we're an expert because we know how to Google or use AI.
Yeah.
There are so many things that are wrong on the internet. We don't want you to fall prey to that. We want you to have the right tools to make the right decisions from the get-go so that you don't have to come see us after you have this huge tax bill or some horrible issue occurs. You don't know what you don't know, and the internet may not be the best place to find that. But if we can look at your personalized situation, plan it out, show you all the ins and outs, and teach you what you don't know, you can make an informed decision and be in great shape in retirement. And when these pivots happen, you're not going to be sitting here freaking out, having this horrible reaction to it of how am I going to pivot? Because we've planned for a lot of these what ifs. And if your plan can pivot, it's not going to be as dramatic and awful, whether it's a positive or a negative pivot in retirement.
That's so true. We just want you to know that when things happen, good or bad, we're there to help you.
That's right.
That's what it's all about.
I love that you brought up old school Ask Jeeves. Did you hear that after 30 years, Ask Jeeves, your search engine butler, finally retired. The website is no longer live.
Oh,
I'd like to know-
congratulations on a wonderful retirement, Ask Jeeves. You did such a subpar job for 30 years that we will miss you.
Too bad you didn't go through the purpose approach with Ricken Financial, Ask Jeeves.
I know, right?
I'll say, Ask Jeeves, is my MySpace account still open as well? Can I go to pets.com?
I actually just heard the other day that MySpace is coming back, so be careful what we wish for.
As what? They reformatted it as a music site where up-and-coming bands can post there. So are they going to try to come back as a social media site?
I'm not quite sure, and I hope to not experience it. There's too many other methods of communication we have nowadays anyway.
I know. Right? It was either like Threads or something out of new social media, and I just finally admitted I am too old to figure out another social media account years old. That's how old I am right now. I've got my few, and I'm good to go. But if you're ready to pivot, make the right pivot in retirement, maybe you just have questions about sold some stock, inheritance, maybe a windfall. What next? The guidance to make sure that you don't blow through that money, that you have a plan so that money can last as long as you do. Build upon the gains in your retirement portfolio. Reach out to the team at Ricken Financial. It's the Purpose Approach. Plan with purpose. Retire with joy. 314-207-6211, 314-207-6211, or rickenfinancial.com. Having a great conversation this weekend about the power of pivoting to and through retirement. And Heidi, sometimes we want to make sure that our assets are preserved so that we don't have to pivot.
Of course. And, when we talk about that, your investment plan is incredibly important to your retirement. And if you are investing the exact same way in retirement that you were during your working years, you are doing yourself a disservice. There are so many different investments that work better for you in retirement than they would have been working in your working years. So when it's time to retire, one of the first steps you need to take with your money is ensuring that your investment plan matches your risk tolerance. And if we've said this once, we'll say it a million times. First of all, you need to know what your risk tolerance is. Second of all, you need to ensure that your assets match that risk tolerance.
Okay, Heidi, you just said, when is time to retire? When is it time to retire, and when should you start thinking about that retirement?
Honestly, if you're 10 to 15 years from retirement today, you should already be thinking through this and ensuring that you're matching your risk tolerance because you don't have the wealth of time anymore. You're in that quote unquote retirement red zone, the death zone. If something happens to your money a decade before retirement, it could ruin your ability to effectively retire. If you're on the threshold of retirement, you definitely need to ensure that this plan is in place. And if you're retired right now in the first 10 years of retirement, that's the most important point in time to be matching your risk tolerance, because I'll tell you, if you're not matching your risk tolerance, you're going to feel the pain when we have a market correction.
And a lot of people just don't think about market corrections, but we've all lived through those. The early 2000s, the late 2000s, we lost an entire decade of the ability to really earn money. And when you think about that, let's just say you retired in 2000 or 2001. What would have happened to your retirement if you hadn't planned and appropriately invested based on your risk tolerance? It wouldn't have been good.
No, I mean, how many people did we meet with back in the day who hadn't come to see us yet and had to go back to work at a smaller paycheck because, if you're on the threshold of retirement or in retirement, it's not like you're the most sought after employee for a high paying job. People are like, this person's going to retire again in 2 years. Why are we going to have them come in and, invest the money in them? We don't want you to have your retirement ruined because you think you're matching your risk tolerance, but you don't know. And I will tell you, about 95% of the people we meet with think they're matching their risk tolerance. And until we sit down and we look at what you're invested in and we run the Morningstar report and we show you the report and the data and the numbers tell you what kind of risk you're exposed to, you don't know what you don't know. And if you're not matching your risk tolerance, like I said, that could be the point in time things get ugly. If you want to go through this process and see, okay, if what I'm doing right now, is it matching my risk tolerance? We'd love to meet and run the reports for you. It just starts with a phone call to 314-207-6211. Our representative will set up some time for us to get together. You're going to bring in the statements and, we're going to run some analyses for you to see, are you matching your risk tolerance or do you need to expand your horizons? Because now is the time for us to use logic and math to plan effectively for your retirement with your investments so that emotional reactions are not going to get in our way.
Heidi, you mentioned 95% of the people who come to us aren't matching their risk tolerance. And really, I think it's 100% because the other 5% are so conservative, they're not even matching their risk tolerance on the other side of the equation. And you really don't know what your risk tolerance is until you go through a process. And it's a process of just reflecting on questions being asked to you. It isn't a difficult process. It just takes time. Yeah. And taking time is the most important thing you can do for planning for the rest of your life.
So here's the deal. You have this retirement, structure. I would call it a retirement plan. You have this asset saved for retirement in the form of a 401k or whatever IRA you might have. What does your retirement plan need to do so that market fluctuation is not going to ruin it?
You just need to know how you're investing and what could happen in the event that something catastrophic did happen in the marketplace. And are you prepared for that? Do you have enough preservation in your portfolio to weather the storm? And it's all about pivoting and weathering the storm. You need to be able to pivot by just saying, yes, we're going to let it sit because we knew what was going to happen. We planned for what was going to happen. We may not necessarily have known what was going to happen, but we planned for that event. So we don't need to make a change because we've already built that into our plan.
And I'll say a lot of times we see people whose entire portfolio is in like a 60-40 strategy, a 70-30 strategy, something like that. That's not an effective plan. What we find is that if this investment, if you have 5 investments, if one investment has a lot of risk exposure to it, and one investment has very minimal risk exposure to it, and the others are kind of in the interim, when you add it all up together, that needs to match your risk tolerance. But if every single investment you have is invested the same way, I can almost guarantee you're not matching your risk tolerance. Mm-hmm. I can never guarantee anything, but I could almost do that because there are so many different investment vehicles available to us that one portfolio that's in 60% equities and 40% bonds, fixed incomes, that's not going to be the best possible solution for you in retirement because what if the stock market and the bond market correct at the same time? What's going to happen to your portfolio then if you're not utilizing indexed funds? Like fixed index annuities, if you're not utilizing structured notes in your portfolio, if everything in your portfolio is correlated, so it's all invested kind of the same way, and you don't have something negatively correlated in there, so, if it all goes up, it's all going up. If it all goes down, it all goes down. You're doing yourself a disservice, and you might not even know that you're leaving money on the table, but you're also exposing yourself to more risk than you'd be comfortable with. So we really need to dive into each of your individual investments, but then all of them as a whole to ensure you're matching your risk tolerance and so that you can weather the storm and not be sitting here in retirement. All of a sudden, we have a market correction. You lose a bunch of money. What do our emotions tell us to do? Our emotions tell us now is the time to freak out, get out of the environment, completely stop investing in the market and stick our money under our mattress. What is the worst thing you can do when you lose a bunch of money in retirement? Get out of the market and stick your money under your mattress, and what our emotions are leading us to do. So this is the one time, we're going to have an emotional response to whatever our money is doing. This is the one time we need to let that logic and math really lead the charge so that you don't get in your own way with your emotions.
Heidi, you mentioned a 60-40 portfolio earlier. And when 60-40 portfolio, 60% stock and 40% bonds, and call it mutual funds on both sides, it really doesn't matter. But if you're investing in a 401k like that, when those 60-40 models were built, people truly did have the negative correlation between stocks and bonds. When bonds went up, stocks went down, and vice versa. But when the 2008 credit crisis hit, guess what happened? Both sectors, bonds and stocks, went down. They both crashed at the same time. So that 60-40, that 40% no longer is a comfort factor, because it used to be early on that it was, but now it isn't. So you need to really look at how you can protect your principal from loss. How you can preserve your principal from loss is really looking at things that really do not lose principal value when the market goes down. That's what we're actually looking at, blending some of that in, and you really can't get that in the 60-40 portfolio anymore.
We've mentioned it a couple of times, the purpose approach from the team at Ricken Financial. If somebody's listening this weekend and they're asking themselves, does my investment plan really match my risk tolerance? Does the purpose approach, will it help me answer that question?
100% it will. The purpose approach will answer that and so many other questions you have regarding your retirement, because what it is a complementary, holistic retirement plan that looks at your income needs, how much you're going to spend, what your investment tolerance and risk tolerance looks like, and how you're invested, your tax planning, your life insurance, your long-term care, your health insurance, your future health care costs, your legacy and estate plan. So many of those ins and outs from retirement. It'll be able to answer so many questions for you that you can make the informed decisions that you'd be comfortable with in your retirement, so that you just get to sit back and enjoy your purpose in retirement, what feeds your soul and brings you joy. So let's plan with purpose and retire with joy together. Just give us a call at 314-207-6211.
Talking a lot this weekend about pivoting in retirement and maybe making some adjustments to your retirement plan. But I guess let's break it down even further. Heidi, Ricken, Provost, Gerry, Ricken. What is a retirement plan? What should it include that we may or may not need to pivot from at some point?
A retirement plan is completely different from our investing strategy when we work. A lot of people will say, well, my 401k is called a retirement plan, so that's my retirement plan. That's an investment. Here's what a retirement plan really is. It is a plan for how are you going to draw your income in retirement? How are your investments going to match your risk tolerance when it comes to your market risk and your tax risk? What's your withdrawal order of your income going to be? How about the taxes overall? How are you going to combat your taxes every step of the way in retirement? What about your health insurance? You know, whether it's retiring before age 65 and you need some health insurance coverage before Medicare, then once Medicare kicks in, what's your plan for that? How about long-term care? If you need long-term care someday, how do you want to cover that? What about life insurance? Do you need life insurance for death benefit, or do you want life insurance for its living benefit? And your legacy and estate, how do you ensure that what you're doing is going to avoid probate and that your largest beneficiary does not become the IRS, but gets to become your family? Well, that's the money piece of a retirement plan. And you want all of that to work towards your purpose in retirement. What do you want to do with your time? How do you want to spend it? Are there any financial goals, wishes, desires that you have that you want to work towards? When you add all of that up together, that really is a retirement plan. It's a plan for all these what ifs that are going to occur in our lifetime. And we here call that the purpose approach. It's your purposeful approach to your retirement. So we sit down and we go through all of this and we put the purpose approach plan together on a complementary basis so that you can ensure you're making the right decisions to meet your risk tolerance, to take care of yourself and your family. So we'd love to start a purpose approach for you. It's just going to take a little bit of time together. And it starts with a phone call to our representative at 314-207-6211. They'll set some time up on our schedule. And we're going to dive in and ask you a whole lot of questions about yourself. What are your statements of your investments look like right now? How much money do you typically spend? What are those goals, wishes, dreams? What about your health needs? We talk through so many different things. And yeah, we do ask you to bring a tax return in with you so we can look at the tax piece of it too, because we want to ensure that you're not going to have this ripple effect where you have to pivot continuously, but that you have a plan that can weather a lot of the storms you're going to face in retirement. And that is most importantly, matching your risk tolerance when it comes to market risk and tax risk. Because as we know, taxes are the largest expense we're going to pay in our lifetime. And we want to ensure that you have the right strategy to handle that in your retirement.
A lot of people come in and they say, well, our person can't talk about taxes. We don't even know about taxes. We have an accountant who does our tax return, and then we have an investment guy who does our investments, and they don't talk to each other. Or if they do talk to each other, it's after the fact, not before the fact, and there's no planning or preparation. How do you prevent yourself from paying additional tax in the future? And the firms that they work with are really phase one firms. Really, there are two kinds of firms out there. There are phase one firms who focus on the investments, and maybe they'll get into a little bit of life insurance or maybe a little bit of long-term care, but that's what their limitation is. They really don't focus on what is your life financially, holistically, going to be for the rest of your life in retirement. And as Heidi said, taxes are going to be your most expensive thing. How can we reduce those so that you pay what you're legally responsible to pay, but it isn't what you would normally pay if you didn't put plans in place to do tax planning? It's all about tax strategies. By the way, the IRS is governed by the Internal Revenue Code. The Internal Revenue Code is written for your benefit, not to your detriment. A lot of people don't understand that, but you need to know how to use it and when to use it and how to effectively use it so that you can live better with more money in your pocket and less in the IRS's pocket.
That involves your tax plan, your tax strategy when you're in your retirement, but that's just one facet of the retirement plan. We've mentioned it here this week, but your income plan, you need to ensure that you have enough income coming in to cover what you want to spend your money on in retirement. And that's going to include making the right decision when it comes to Social Security. Because if you leave too much money on the table with Social Security, that could have a detrimental effect, especially if you're living to age 100. And what other forms of income do you need coming in to cover your expenses? And are your investments working in the most efficient manner to make that income work for you or not? So that investment plan, not only does it need to ensure that you're matching your risk tolerance for your market and tax risk, but you need to ensure that it's working most effectively for your income strategy and that you have the best withdrawal order and withdrawal strategy of, which account am I touching first? What's going to last longest for me? Because I'll tell you, one of the most common concerns we come across from the prospects we meet with every single day is, how do I ensure I'm not going to be a burden on my family? How do I ensure I can retire? How do I ensure I can spend this amount of money? If you don't have a plan that takes all of this into consideration, you probably can't ensure that you're going to be okay. But if you have a plan where you stick it all together and you can see it in black and white, we're in the show me state. We're going to show you the numbers. We're going to show you how they work in your favor. But if you can't see that, how are you supposed to know if you're ready to retire? If you're going to be okay? If a health crisis is going to affect you and ruin your retirement? There are so many different things that we could face in our retirement years that if you don't have that holistic plan in place, it's too much for one person to handle on their own.
Yeah.
It really is. But if you have that plan, it's not that hard to pivot the plan to ensure that it's going to continue to stand the test of time.
And all the pieces of the plan work together. When we talk about long-term care, if you need long-term care coverage in the future, how do you most effectively cover that? And do you cover it with taxable income or non-taxable income? So you need to look at everything. And when you look at everything, you will know the answers. We have the answers, but we don't have all the answers, obviously, because no one can predict the future. But if you'd like to just know what a plan could look like and what your life could look like, call 314-207-6211, and just get that conversation started, because we want to help as many people as we possibly can, because we have the knowledge. We have the ability to sit down and dissect where you are and where you can be in the most efficient plan that we have our ability to plan for, so that you can live a joyful retirement.
Well, Heidi, it's worth mentioning to the adults who may have been working with the big box firm, maybe it's about time you're ready to pivot to more of someone who lives here, works here, plays here, understands the economy of St. Louis, and more importantly, they're just a phone call away, not an 800 number. And maybe it's time for those people to pivot and take advantage of your second opinion service.
Well, that's just it. because, some people are loyal to a fault and they think that they need to stay with the person that helped them get to retirement through all of their retirement years too. But as Gerry mentioned earlier, it takes a different strategy. We are not the experts that sit here and say, here is what you need to do to start out to accumulate your funds to the future. What we specialize in is retirement. That's why it's in our name. Kicking with the Rickens, redefining retirement. We are phase 2 investment planners who help you with your retirement strategy. And we love doing what we do. But if you plan to retire one day, you need a retirement planner on your side, not an investment manager who's just going to help you accumulate those funds, but someone who can help you plan for forever. So maybe it is time to pivot to someone like us, the Rickens, who can help you redefine your retirement so that you can just simply plan with purpose and retire with joy and just get to enjoy your retirement and not sit here worrying about all the financial stresses. We love doing what we do and we love being able to bring it to the airwaves. But if you ever want to continue your education, we're pretty darn adamant that we believe education is the only way to make the informed decisions in retirement. So we'd love you to stream Kickin' with the Rickens, Redefining Retirement, our podcast. You can find it pretty much anywhere you listen to the podcast too, to just continue the conversation. And when you're ready, we're always going to be available here at rickenfinancial.com or 314-207-6211.
And as always, Heidi, Gerry, thank you. Thank you for the education. Thank you for the information this week and great conversation about pivoting in retirement. Well, we have to pivot, but before we get out of here, Heidi Ricken Provost, Gerry Ricken, take us home.
Every day is a holiday.
Life is short. Laugh hard.
This has been Kickin' with the Rickens, Redefining Retirement.
Insurance products are offered through the insurance business Ricken Financial LLC. Ricken Financial LLC is also an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through Impact Partnership Wealth LLC, a registered investment advisor. IPW does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by Ricken Financial LLC are not subject to investment advisor requirements. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. Ricken Financial LLC is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during the show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Ricken Financial LLC.
Please remember that converting an employer plan account to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. Increased taxable income from the Roth IRA conversion may have several consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA.
Tax preparation and tax advisory services are offered through Ricken Financial. These services are not offered by IPW and are not subject to investment advisor requirements. These services referenced are an outside business activity not offered through or supervised by IPW.